from a senior research fellow for technology and innovation with the Charles Koch Institute. He is the former acting chief technologist at the Federal Trade Commission. Everyone, please let's have a warm welcome for Mr. Neil Chilson.
Thank you. I may be the only lawyer on this panel, which is a real privilege for me and maybe less of a privilege for all of you, so I apologize in advance. But despite that background, I'm going to lead off with a music metaphor. If you just read the headlines recently, you would think that the future of the internet, the future of speech online, is one of cacophony. It's an orchestra that somehow failed, that's broken down. The old conductors that we had who kind of moderated our conversations, they're not there anymore, and now it's just noise. And the result is, this clamor of fake news and hate speech and manipulation and tribal polarization, and a lot of that's happening, right? And the solutions offered are more government oversight often, increased legal liability maybe, perhaps even rethinking the First Amendment. But I think that description, that story, leaves out another part of the internet that's happening. And I'll use an example. There's a guy named Geng Xiao. Has anybody heard of Geng Xiao? Geng Xiao is a 30-year-old welder in rural China. He started making and sharing videos of his really weird inventions that he came up with. His fans lovingly, I assume it's lovingly, call him China's useless Edison. So I think his first big hit was he made a meat cleaver that also is a cell phone holder. He has this tennis racket-sized device that you can use to cut a watermelon into all its slices all at once. He has this really cool earthquake-proof noodle bowl. And he has this zipper alarm to prevent embarrassing wardrobe malfunctions. So the interesting thing is that Geng really hasn't sold any of these products. Not much. He's maybe sold 10, 12. Maybe it's bigger now. But what he does sell is what he's producing, and what people want to hear is speech. He's creating these videos. He has millions of followers. And he welds things, but what he's really making is content. And people want to hear it. So he makes a lot more now than he did when he was welding. He's even broke into the mainstream. I learned about him not from the platform that he uses in China, but from the LA Times. And yeah, it's a really interesting story. Now, China, not the best example of free speech, perhaps. And if Geng was, instead of making funny things, he was making fun of the government, this might be a more tragic story. But his story does show the power, the personally beneficial power of finding even a little bit of freedom and using the right tools to be able to connect with people about something you make. And that story, I think, is increasingly common. And to me, the future of the internet looks a lot like his use of the internet. I think the long tail of content is going to get even longer. We're going to have people who are creating content constantly and finding a micro audience for that content. And that has benefits, it has risks. And there's similar risks that we encounter in the rest of tech policy. So at the Charles Koch Institute, I spent a lot of time emphasizing the benefits of permissionless innovation. This is the idea that if you want to make something new, you shouldn't have to ask, if you want to make a new service or a new product and use it for other people or for yourself, you shouldn't have to ask permission. And history shows that often that this has turned out to be really good for innovation, that when we have frameworks like this, it works really well. The counter to it is a precautionary approach, one that says, if you're going to try something new, you need to check with the right people first. You need to make sure it's not going to harm people. You need to show that before you move ahead. And that narrowing of options makes it harder to innovate. It especially makes it hard to do things that nobody had thought was possible before. Whereas if you don't have to seek permission, those things you can move ahead with easier. This is all very abstract. I apologize. I told you I was a lawyer. So given our support for permissionless innovation, it shouldn't be any surprise that we are strong supporters at CKI of the First Amendment and of free speech, because the First Amendment is a permissionless framework for communication of ideas. It says individuals don't have to get permission from the government to speak. They don't have to, the government can't compel speech or block speech because they don't like it. It allows people to test their ideas in the marketplace, where others will respond and react. And you know, permissionless innovation doesn't guarantee that all innovations are going to be great, right? But it does, and just like that, free speech doesn't guarantee that every idea is going to be good or every idea is going to be wise. But both of the frameworks and their permissionless nature let us experience and innovate and bring new products out much easier than it would be in the permissioned environment. So thankfully, here in the US, we today have a pretty strong legal framework protecting a permissionless framework for free speech. You know, the First Amendment is uniquely powerful, I think, in limiting government's ability to interfere with speech. But that's really not a reason to relax. Today's primary threat to free speech isn't legal in nature. As Supreme Court Justice Learned Hand said, "Liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can save it." And the history of free speech is full of times where our hearts faltered, where the commitment to free speech rights of others grew weak in the face of disagreeable or offensive speech. Now, it's human nature to silence or to seek to silence those with whom we disagree. But counterintuitively, when we do so, we reduce free speech's ability to empower people, to move science and society forward, and to keep our institutions healthy. So we need to teach people about this counterintuitive result. We need to commit to free speech and to the permissionless exchange of ideas. We need to ourselves be good examples of civil discourse. These aren't easy tasks, but they are important. And if we can do this, we'll never have a future internet that looks like an orchestrated, like a professional orchestra, but we never did. What we will have is, hopefully, we'll have a future that's more like the orchestra of a forest on a summer night, where all of the sounds are an emergent, beautiful thing, each coming from an organism that's growing, that's changing, that's learning, and singing its song. Thank you.
Okay,